All right, I'll begin slowly as people are finishing coming in. I don't know if this place is like Santa Cruz. I'm from Santa Cruz, and you know, I start a presentation. I'm like, oh my God, no one's here. And like a minute before the hour, it's like 10 people come in, and a minute after the hour, another 10 people come in, right? And you're like, okay, I'm not alone, right? So yeah, we'll slowly, as people come in, welcome. So yes, I'm Eva. I work mainly with medical hypnotherapy, mainly with chronic disease. And today I'm going to teach you guys about my baby. I've been working with multiple sclerosis for over a decade now. And so picture this. A client comes to your office with an array of symptoms. She has this numbing in her hand, which makes it hard for her to write, right? She has this heaviness in her foot, which makes it hard for her to walk straight. And she has fatigue, which makes it's kind of like unpredictable fatigue. So there's days that she gets all this stuff done, and the next day she can't even put the dishes in the sink kind of thing. Then she also at night, that leg that's stiff at night has tons of spasms, right? Which makes it hard to sleep. Additionally, she's been getting lately bladder issues. It seems to just be like urgent, like when she has to go, it's like now, which makes it really hard to go out. This is quite an array of symptoms. Welcome to MS. So what do, right? Client comes in and it's like, whoa, right? You're going to start jumping into each symptom. What are you going to do? Today what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to give you guys a structure to work with multiple sclerosis, but also to work with any client with chronic disease, so that anyone who comes in with an array of symptoms, you know a possibility of what to do and what to navigate. Because we can address something, as Craig said, that the medical field can't, and that is their lives. All right, so to make this more realistic, we're going to have a mock client. This is Nancy, she's taller than me. Nancy is a single child. Her dad was pretty strict as a kid, always encouraging her to do better, always encouraging her to do even better. And her mom had a chronic disease herself, and so Nancy's always grown up with the mom always having health issues. So Nancy's been more of a caretaker than a daughter, and she actually doesn't confide in her mom with her problems because we don't want to upset mom, she already has too much going on. So Nancy's she's gone through college. She worked her butt off. She did like 110% of effort. Not even 100, a lot. And even then she's always wondering, did I do enough? Did I do enough? So she's now starting her first job, been in a couple years, and it is hard going for her. She's not sure exactly what she's supposed to do, and she doesn't want to ask for help. She's never done that. Whenever her boss corrects her, it floors her for days. She really doesn't like this profession, actually, but she decided to do this profession because it's the right thing to do. So she took up law. And when all this is going on, it doesn't occur to her actually to quit this job. Even though she has a toxic boss, she really doesn't like what she's doing. She doesn't know what she's doing. No one's teaching her what she's supposed to be doing. But it doesn't occur to her to quit because she's not a quitter. She doesn't want to fail in this. So she's going to just do whatever she can and just push forward. While all this is going on, her husband comes to her one day and says, I want out. I want a divorce. So if you think about it, she has all this pressure, and then one more thing happens. But it doesn't stop there. She powers through. Almost a year later, she finally has changed jobs. She's learned to live alone. She has supportive friends. And right when things are finally going her way, she's able to breathe. These weird symptoms come in. She goes to the doctors and says, hey, I have this numbing, or I have this double vision, not sure what's going on. And the doctor tells her, you have this thing called multiple sclerosis, MS. She doesn't know much, what is it? And he starts telling her. But of course, this is a medical field, and he says, well, with multiple sclerosis, it might progress. Most definitely will probably progress. So she's hearing progress, right? He tells her, because that's what they're supposed to do, that there's the possibility that in 10 years you'll be in a wheelchair, right? And then, she's in stress. She's like, oh my gosh, what is this? And she asks, could this have anything to do with what happened to me last year? And the doctor says, well, the studies are inconclusive, so probably not. And he tells her just, there's not too much you can do. You can take these medications and maybe it'll slow down progressing. And then he sends her off. So this is your client. And she comes to your office, and all she wants to do is just get rid of these symptoms and go back to her life, right? But where is her life? What was that, right? But her goal is, hey, can you get rid of these symptoms for me so I can return to that life I had? What I want to present to you today is that if you can actually get her to return to that life, that would be an injustice. Why? Because there was a lot there. There was a lot of stress. See, she's coming in and she's been told that it's probably inconclusive, so she's thinking it's probably my bad luck, or it's probably my genes, or it's probably because I had donuts and smoked when I was that stressed. So it must be the gluten and the smoking, because everyone's told me that smoking is really bad for me, and it's probably part of what my MS is about. So she has no clue about this connection. Hello, welcome. I'm going to take an opportunity to make sure I have a lot to share today. So in this presentation, we're going to suppose that those symptoms are actually a biological response of the body to this overload of stressors, this combination of stressors. Why do I think that? Because as I said at the very beginning, I've been working with MS for a decade, almost 100 clients, and I see the same upbringing. I see similar patterns of parenting. I see similar experiences, beliefs, coping mechanisms, and I don't think that's random. Because other clients I have with Parkinson and other things, they don't have these patterns. They have other set of patterns. All right, so let's go back to our original question. What do we do when she comes in, right, with all this array of symptoms? We're not going to work on the symptoms, and I'm going to keep coming to this because even my own client and my own teachers sometimes, it's like we know this when it comes to an emotional issue, but when it comes to physical, we just think, oh, got to get rid of that physical thing, that's what we're supposed to do. The symptoms are not the problem. They're actually pointing to the problem. So there's going to be 3 areas that I'm going to suggest you work on with your clients. You're going to have what's called the predisposing factors that actually create the groundwork. Those would be those beliefs and behaviors and maladaptive coping mechanisms they've had from childhood. You're going to be looking at what's called the triggering factors, which is what happened before onset, which was enough for the body to make a biological response. And then you're going to be looking at the reinforcing factors that are actually still happening today over and over again, which is why this is chronic and which is why this can become a progression of disease. All right? So to start, we're going to be looking at actually the triggering factors first. What happened right before the onset? Because it's going to give us a lot of information, and if you look on the notes, you'll have that little graph. We're going to start with those. Now, this is the thing that happens. It happens a lot. Is oftentimes with chronic disease, as with our Nancy, symptoms don't begin. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes symptoms don't begin when all this stuff is happening. Symptoms begin when the body finally gets the message to get out of fight or flight. And this can be a year later. This in PTSD research is called, I'm going to forget the word, is called late onset, right? It's delayed onset PTSD. And in PTSD, the studies have shown it could be between 6 years and, 6 months and a year. The same with chronic disease. And this is what makes it tricky. Your client, because it happened a year before, your client doesn't make the connection. But when you present it, they most often do. Of course, if it's been 20 years, they don't. And then we have to do some regression just to bring into that space. So the triggering factors. Let me give you another example. And then if this is all you come away with today, I'll be happy. Let me just check. Is everyone hot? Because I'm noticing, people, let me see if this thing, it's at 71. Yes, I don't know which is which. Cool, it's done. But it's at 71, which might be too hot. I don't know if, what? Okay, yeah, it doesn't want, it's saying no. Okay, so what I was saying, if this is all you come away with, I will be content. Remember what I said about the symptom. The symptom is not the problem. It's pointing to the problem. And I wanted to give you guys just what I think is an obvious example, just to kind of go, oh, yeah, you're right. Another client comes in, and Maria, and she comes in and she's crying inconsolably, just bawling her eyes out. So let me ask you, would you put her in trance and ask her tear ducts to dry? Why? Because there's something that happened and her body's responding, right? She's releasing. She probably has some sort of loss, something that is a grief, right? By the way, I'm doing a grief presentation tomorrow, just put it in there. But yeah, she has a grief. And so what is the best way to deal with her inconsolable tears? Let it flow and probably address that grief, right? If you address what caused the biological response, you don't have to even talk about tears. Those things will go away on their own. All right, so let's begin with these triggering factors. We're going to assume that I do a lot of NLP, and NLP always has these presuppositions, right? So we're going to presuppose when the client comes in that their body at 26 years old didn't just break down, right? We're going to assume that it's not just bad genes. Actually, the research shows that it's not just bad genes. We're going to assume something must have triggered the body. Because the body, went to a presentation, the subconscious is constantly moving towards healing. So something made the body go, this is my only solution to what's happening. Think about this. If I take my water bottle and I do this, how's my muscle? Is it stressed? Okay, if I don't do anything, probably, yes? But if I then take something that's 20 or 30 pounds, what's going to happen to this muscle? It's going to build. And the way it's going to build is the muscle is getting the message, my person can't deal with this element. I'm going to have to biologically change this muscle in order to respond to this increase. And so the next day, that pain you have in your muscle is actually your muscle breaking down and building stronger. So that the next time you grab something that's 20 pounds, you're more capable. So we're going to assume that's what's happening in multiple sclerosis or in any chronic diseases. The body has gotten the message, my person was not able to respond to this because with all this pressure, they got one extra hit. So I need to biologically change to become better capable of dealing with what's going on. And it doesn't matter if that thing is physical or mental. For the body, we've all known, the subconscious will pick up anything that's physical or imagined, right? Okay, so we're going to be looking for sensitizing events prior to onset. Has anybody heard that word? Yes. So, as I said, there's two. There's usually two with multiple sclerosis. There's a ongoing stressor. You're actually going to be finding an ongoing stressor that has everything to do with feeling stuck or feeling trapped. And then there's going to be just a side swipe that usually has to do with relationships, right? It's like all this pressure, and then the one person, my person, is either leaving or I'm leaving. I've had clients in which they, under all this stress, realize, oh my gosh, I don't want to marry him, right? So it can go either way. And it's just enough that the body goes, okay, hang on a minute. I need to get her out of this. There's too much. In psychology, this is called the diathesis stress model. This is that there's an ongoing stressor, and then there's just one more culminating event, more acute stressor that comes in that creates this biological response of disease. Okay? Another way of also explaining this is, anybody heard allostatic load? So allostatic load in the body is when the body is loaded and loaded with any kind of stressor. So you'll actually find with, I've had a client in which the stuck issue was that she had just broken her leg, and she was trying to keep working and trying to keep doing, and she felt that this leg she was stuck, right? Stuck, but she didn't want to quit or ask for, hey, you know what, I need a month off. This is too much. So even if it's a physical thing, it can also create that allostatic load, that increase in the body. So the body becomes really alert to, okay, what's going on? This is a lot, this is a lot of weight, what's happening? All right. So, checking my times. Okay. So what are the stressors for Nancy? What's going on in Nancy's life? Do we remember? Mm-hmm.
The job was difficult. My husband left. Dysfunctional relationship with his mother.
Oh yeah, see? She's starting to get into the other one, the predisposing. All right, so the thing is, this is not the first time Nancy has experienced getting stuck. This is a long-term time. This is also not the first time she has any relationship issues. And so once we get these sensitizing events, if you guys recall, and who's here done any regression therapy? Yay! So once you get the sensitizing event, is this where you want to stay? No, you want to go to the initial sensitizing events. This is just showing you where you need to be working, but you're going to take the emotions she has regarding those events, her beliefs regarding those events. I can't ask for help. You want to take all those elements that you collect regarding that onset experience, the onset experiences, these two, and you want to take it to her past, to the predisposing factors. What was happening in her childhood that created that foundation for this to be able to happen, right? If you have a client who's always been encouraged, or only been encouraged, to do her best, to never fail, to be number one, she doesn't know how to quit, right? If you have a client that's always been the helper, the little helper of mom, she doesn't know how to ask for help. She doesn't know how to share in her job, hey, I don't know what the hell's going on and no one's explaining it to me because everyone's too busy, right? So you want to go to her past and find those initial sensitizing events that create the beliefs and behaviors that are showing up at that onset event. Does that make sense? I'm seeing some smiles and some eyebrows. There's a connection. Now, what are you going to do over here? I've taken like years to figure out what is the best thing to do with those predisposing factors.
Maybe help them find the voice that they weren't allowed to express at that time?
Okay, perfect. What else are you going to do in these predisposing factors? Because this is the foundation of making that. What?
You mean the event or the belief about it?
Well, the beliefs that she has comes from events. Some are repetitive events, like with her mother, but comes from things that happen in childhood. And you can take it to the earliest time or most important time you ever felt that feeling, I can't ask for help. Yes.
So do a trauma reversal?
So what would be a trauma reversal?
I thought that was a standard.
Okay, yeah, so you could, if it's traumatic, yes, you want to deal with that trauma. And you want to do what your colleague said here, is what I have found most powerful is once you find these, it can be the initial or at least an important event, is you want to bring, I'm not going to curse, a lot of resources into her childhood. And what I have found most powerful, and I want to thank Robert Dilts for his book, Systemic Belief Change, is that I have found the most effective way of dealing with these predisposing is to actually have her today think of a resource she has today to bring it to those predisposing events. So she might not be able to ask for help, but she might be really good at asking her dog to fetch a treat, whatever it is. You want to find resources she has today to take them to these events. And you're going to do it in a certain way. At least this is what I have found most powerful, is Robert Dilts' technique is actually to take it first to the parents. What are the parents needed then? If they have a strict father and a mother who's always played, not on purpose, the victim, what do those parents need? What kind of resources might they need? Maybe dad needs some playfulness. Maybe he needs to heal from his dad, who was very strict, right? He needs to be given permission to fail. He doesn't have to be the perfect dad. Dad's okay, I love you anyway. Any of those things, you want to give it to the parents. You want to have them witness, what is it like when your parents have your resource, something that for you is so natural. What is it like? What usually happens is they say, oh my God, it would completely change. Oh my gosh, something you have naturally would completely make those events obsolete, impossible to ever have occurred. Those paradigms, right? Those ways of relating. Once they've seen that, then you have them become the parent, experience the parent having this, become the child, experience the child receiving a parent with this change, with something that they have within themselves. And then to grow up with a parent that has this, and is taught this by their parents. And then, and I think I love this piece, is then to re-experience that event, even as their parents are completely human and imperfect and have all their problems, but they have the resource they had today at that time. So even if their parents were this way or that way, or their teacher, they know it's all okay, they know they're lovable, etc. Right? And I have found that to really, really help with all these predisposing factors. What would you do after that? After you've worked here, what do you think would happen? You can do it with the parents?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So my question, her. So she was saying maybe do an energy exchange between the parents. Yeah. Maybe forgive the parents for being human, right? Yeah. Give them back anything. Give them back that perfection. Give them back that need to be, to not fail. Give them all those things back. And then take those resources you've just built and take them back to those events before the onset. Because once they have those and they've experienced how powerful it is, they come back to this and it makes this situation obsolete. Right? Where else can I take these? to the reinforcing factors. Yay! All right, so on cue, yes.
When you're talking about resources, are you meaning like qualities that, qualities of compassion, cheerfulness, accountability, resilience, like those are in, like resources, not like money?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Resources, tools they have, abilities they have today. And I never tell them what it is.
Yeah.
I always say, wow, look at your dad. Okay, let's look at it from the outside now. Once they've tapped into it, disassociate. Okay, what's happening there? What would your dad need? What's happening? Why do you think he's doing that? What would he need to not need to do that for you? Oh, he would need to be accepted and loved. Okay, do you remember a time that you have experienced that today? I never know where we're going. And it's always brilliant because I always say the person with the problem has the solution. It's there. It's the mirror of the problem, so it has to be within the same system. So they have that solution. Yes?
So the question, I have a daughter who has a dad that pushed like crazy, and, the person really excelled. So it's giving them the opportunity to take control back from their dad. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
And to give them your number.
And,
Don't tell me what happened.
and have them teach you to relax. Have you guys be buddies, and let's learn to relax together. Or let me teach you what I've learned now that now that I'm a grandfather. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just going to review a little bit to see if I've gotten everything, because I've really wanted to cover so many little elements. All right, so we did all the predisposing factors. Good. So let's explore those reinforcing factors. Okay, what's happening on a day-to-day basis? This is an interesting one, and it's fun to do too, is their bodies today, once there is a biological change like this, their body is actually now sensitized to anything that's similar to what happened when the body decided, okay, my person isn't strong enough, I need to make a change, right? It's like an allergy. What is an allergy? Anyone here studied NLP? That's one definition. In NLP, an allergy actually is an overreaction of the body to something the body thinks is dangerous. Is cat hair dangerous? Right? Will it bite you? But if you were bitten by a cat as a child, your body's going to think a cat is dangerous. I actually remember I was working with my sister because she has dog allergies, and it's really interesting because she doesn't have allergies to her own dogs, but she has allergies to anybody else's dogs. And I told her, I go, Delmar, what? Isn't that odd for you? Have you ever questioned? And she goes, well, my dogs aren't going to bite me. And I was like, let's work on this. Because what's interesting is I was the one that got bit by the dog. But she's the one who developed allergies. So oftentimes the event isn't experienced here, it's watched, and it's worse. I was fine. I was just feeling guilty. My mom told me, don't play with the puppies, and I did. And I was like, oh, shoot. And puppy put her little, sharp little tooth, and you know how noses are. They bleed everywhere. But my sister, of course, got the trauma. I was just like, I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty. I should, Mom's going to be so mad at me. So actually, even with chronic disease, their bodies are going to overreact to anything that smells of what happened before the onset. So when it comes to MS, anytime they're in a situation they don't want to be in, and this can be as minor as, I'm tired, but I need to wash my clothes. I should be washing clothes. It's the right thing to do. It's Sundays when I wash my clothes. Okay, I'm just going to push myself through it. That'll set their bodies off, and the next day they can barely move. When it's a Friday night and a friend comes over and smokes and says, "You want a cigarette?" And, Nancy says, "I don't smoke anymore." And then says, "Oh, give me one." And during that onset, the time before onset, she had been smoking because she was stressed. One night of smoking today sets her body off, and she feels awful the next day because the body is now sensitized to it. So they're going to come to you and say, "I don't know why randomly my symptoms are worse some days, worse, better other days. Some days I don't even know I have MS, and other days I can't get out of bed." You will actually notice that those are actually responses to things that are similar. So helping them gain that awareness, and then as you're doing this, you'll actually notice, like any allergy process. Anyone here done the NOP allergy process? Yeah. So oftentimes what you do with the allergy process is you find something similar they have no issues with, right? Because the body has said, oh, this smoking is related to this event, to getting stuck. But if you now take smoking and make it a relating to, having a barbecue, and you connect those, disconnect this, the body no longer responds. Not that you want them to smoke again, but that's just one example, right? You can do that with the pushing too. I will take that feeling, of stuck and take it back, and what else feels stuck and you're totally fine with it, and start desensitizing the body in those elements. And there's one other really important piece. The day of the diagnosis. So on the day of the diagnosis, when they don't know what's going on, they have symptoms, they're not sure, they've never had this thing, right? All of a sudden, half their body's numb. Or they can't see straight, right? They're totally wide open, afraid, awake, hypnotized. Their doctor says it will most probably progress. Think of it, don't drop the milk. What happens with a little kid when you say don't drop the milk 3 times? It's down. It will possibly progress. You might end up in a wheelchair, right? Is that they now have a belief, and they have a third sensitizing event, which is the day of the diagnosis. They're told what's going to happen. They have a nocebo. What is a nocebo? Yes, and it can be more powerful than a placebo. Have you guys heard when a doctor says you'll die in 3 months and people die in exactly 3 months? And then, that's a nocebo. And with MS and a lot of these chronic diseases is they have received a nocebo. I didn't realize how important this was until in 2016 I was doing research on this, a pilot. And one of the women had been working with me now, like 12 sessions, 6 months, and everyone was improving, and it was like, oh my gosh. And one woman she got the flu, right? She got the flu, and then it turned into pneumonia. So she was out for like a month. She came back. We did our first session, and she came back. She was stiff and everything, because think of the allostatic load, right? Her body, again, gets overweight. The body's like, I'm going to do what I know how to do, right? I'm going to keep her down here. And so she comes in, and she's walking worse than she had been and stuff. And I say, just patience. Let's work on patience. Let's work on these things. And she's like, oh, I'm so much worse. And I was like, yeah, but, we can recover from this. And she goes, well, Eva, this is a progressive disease. It's only going to get... Oh my gosh, if I don't address that directly, every single time they have a symptom that they're not expecting. Every single time, half of my clients with the COVID vaccine spend at least 4 days to several weeks much worse, because it's an allostatic load. It's just another load in the body. So the body goes, stress seems familiar, let me just do my symptoms, right? For them, they're like, oh my gosh, this vaccine's going to make me progress now. Here I go to the wheelchair. What can you do with that? what techniques, what can you do with that trauma, let's say, diagnosis, and those beliefs? Yes?
Gotta change the belief, right?
You gotta change the belief. How would you do that? What would be some processes to do that? Huh?
All kinds of ways.
All kinds of ways. Yeah. I use, what? You want to reframe? Yeah, one thing is so I actually have a blog that has like 23 references in the blog, just for the people who are analytic, that demonstrates that actually in multiple sclerosis, 60% of clients never progress. 30% barely feel anything. Another 30% just wax and wane. 60% do not progress at all. But you go to normal websites, you go even to the MS Society site, and it says, the majority of people progress. That is not a good motivator, right? So first I educate them about the possibilities. I tell them, hey, you're here. You're actually doing something. You are working with your body instead of against it. So you're closer to the 60% than anyone who just sitting back and hoping, right? And so that's the first piece. The second piece, I use the swish. I don't know if you guys have done, I do a lot of MP. I want to get that wheelchair image that's right here in their future. We need to move that out of there. Because anytime they feel something, there's their future pacing, right? Feel something, future pacing, feel something. One of the women also in the study, she was 52. So during the study, she's got her symptoms of MS, but then she's also she was like, I think I have a new symptom. I think it's my MS is progressing. I don't know, I don't think this is working. And I was like, well, what's going on? She goes, I am sweating up a storm at night. I don't think these are MS symptoms. I think this is called perimenopause. And so, but any symptoms, they have the flu. Oh my gosh, my fatigue is just like crazy today. Well, I'm hearing something else going on too. I wonder if the fatigue has more to do with the flu than with your MS, right?
You're kind of myth busting.
There's a lot of myth busting because I've never had a child, but my sister has, and before she had her baby, and for you guys who have had kids, how many people told you stories about, oh my God, the day my child was born, she just busted my blah, 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 I had 42 stitches. Who tells you these things, right? So people go to have a baby, and instead of it being the most beautiful, natural thing, they have 201 stories of not the best case scenarios, because people don't get passed around, right? They learn about the neighbor's sister's birth, right? The same thing happens with MS. So there are a lot of people with MS. I forgot to look at it. It's like 100 in every 100,000 people. There's actually quite a few people that have MS. You don't see them all. Remember, 60%, 30%, they don't have symptoms. They don't go back to their neurologist. So even their neurologist doesn't have an accurate assessment of just how many people progress, because if you're like, well, he's telling me this and I'm not feeling anything, I'm just going to crawl into a closet and forget I had MS. And some people it does work, right? Because the body did what it did and then they completely changed their lives. I remember every time I come across someone or someone says, oh, so-and-so healed their MS, I will go and interview them. And I was like, what would you do? What'd you learn? What is that? And I remember one woman, she was like, oh, meditations were my thing. And I go, okay, so anything else you did? She goes, well, I divorced my husband who didn't really love me. I moved into a little cabin instead of having a house that's paying $6,000 a month. I changed jobs, this and this, which I hate doing, and now I'm doing this thing which I love. It gives me no pressure. And and it's like, I think that has anything to do with the fact that you don't have any symptoms, right? So if there's this humongous change, there's nothing that's triggering this. Yeah.
When a doctor says it's progressive, it's just prestige agenda, and so I think that you've worked as a nurse for all these years, right? Are you an RN?
Nope.
No, okay.
No.
So what I wonder though is counteracting that type of prestige suggestion with something that's going to also hold clout for that type of patient who just reflexively responds with dread to that type of a diagnosis.
Yeah. That's why I'm a research nerd, but I'm not an RN. But yeah, that's why I have papers, and I have blogs and stuff to refer people to, because there are some people like, yeah, but he's an authority. And I'm like, yeah, look, 27 authority studies with 14,000 people with MS have found that, and then in that study, it shows that if you actually have any kind of improvements, you are 50 times more likely not to get worse, and so all of that helps also to counteract. And then if you actually stick that in a hypnosis recording, that helps too, right? Yeah. Yeah. And then one more bit, and then we're going to review it, because I know I'm like, it's like a fire hose of information. One more bit on this reinforcing factors. Think of Nancy. She's 26 years old. She's a lawyer. She was married. And she got divorced, yes. She's still a lawyer. And she goes to her doctor, and her doctor tells her, at the ripe age of 26, you will probably end up in a wheelchair at 36. That diagnosis totally eliminated her future, her identity, her motivations, right? Who am I going to be if I can't work 110%? If I can't continuously improve and prove myself to be worthy? Because, I had one of my clients saying, I'm a sack of potatoes if I'm in a wheelchair, right? She's surrounded by 5 kids who love her to death and would do anything to her. But she was like, I'm used to being the doer, being the helper, right? And so lastly, in the reinforcing factors, creating a compelling, healthy, motivating, robust, bringing those resources as well into their future to create a future self they're motivated to move towards, which usually does not include law or anything they don't want to be doing, and they push themselves to do it anyway, right? All right, so I'm making times here. In a nutshell, you have a client come in with an array of symptoms. Again, if it's MS, we know a little bit the patterns of what we're going to expect. If it's any chronic disease, one of the things I do is we're going to check that onset. What was happening in that time in your life? Well, how about a little bit before that? How about a little bit before that? A little bit before that? And how about a little bit before that? Bam, right? For me, if the client has been diagnosed maybe 10 years, 12 years before, they'll remember. If they've been diagnosed 20 years before, they'll tell you that was the best time in their life and this MS took their lives away, right? And so there I use regression because critical factor is not there, and so they will see what really was happening, right? And so you want to go from here, discover what's happening, get those emotions, those beliefs. What were you believing? I couldn't ask for help. What were you believing? I had to prove my worth. What were you believing? Oh my God, I was so stuck. How familiar is that feeling? Take it back to the first time you can, or take it back and take it back and take it even earlier and earlier to the earliest time you can remember feeling those feelings. Work on those resources, bring resources to the system if you want to make a really significant change. And then bring that today. Because they're experiencing stuck. Think about it. Anytime they think about that wheelchair, I'm going to get stuck in a wheelchair. Anytime they have their leg is acting up, I can't ask for help, but how am I going to do? But if I can't ask for help, I can't ask my supervisor to put me a parking space next to the entrance, but I can't get there. And so all those elements, right? So you want to work here, and you want to eliminate, reduce that trauma and the beliefs around the diagnosis, any diagnosis, right? Because it can get in the way. Yes?
When you have somebody who is having such a wide array of physical range of experience of something, it's hard, I would think it would be harder to really see the connection between the mindfulness work or the future pacing that they're doing for themselves when all of a sudden then, they have another event. And I understand what you're saying about creating a greater awareness of those triggers. So what is sort of a kind of a broad-based treatment plan that you give a client who's going through that process of becoming aware of triggers and dealing with this array of experiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, once we've come here and we start seeing these elements and these I can't ask for helps or I feel stuck in this or the other, then you can have them, I give them a recording at the end of the session. Because I do a lot of my sessions with NLP because I love the change work there. And then I'll record whatever resources and future pace the hell out of the resources. And then I'll ask them, hey, you have 2 weeks. Notice, write down 5 times you got stuck. And let's look at those. So that they can start noticing the things that trigger them. Because yes, you're going to do really big piece of work and it's going to be a lot less often they get stuck. But when their mom calls, one of these isn't always enough, right? Certain elements are going to be a bit more work to do. But we'll talk about what we've discovered and I'll, give them permission to, hey, if you notice it happening, write it down. I need at least 5, make them succeed in failing. All right? Yeah?
What percentage do you find of people that find that what their need is for MS is because they want to be taken care of because they have that need to be taken care of?
The secondary gain?
Well, it's very interesting the different levels of people you run into and those that seem to never progress and then those
That usually will actually come from over here. Because so I've had clients like that. It's like, in a way, MS helps me that someone finally takes care of me. But that's actually coming from the fact that in childhood, their mom had a mental health issue, and it was always about mom. And so they just wished someday someone will take care of me. So if you work with this, then there's more motivating factors to not need to utilize the MS for that.